and also welcome anyone who is now able to listen to me on the audio. I remembered my mic at long last. There are two sections to the agenda. There's the licensing committee and then the public protection part of it. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing to be dealt with under the closed agenda. So if we get straight to the first item on the agenda, it's apologies. I have one apology from Councillor Adcock, Rupert Adcock, and he's substituted by Councillor Hutchison. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to licensing matters in the agenda? No, thank you. If we look at the minutes of the previous meeting, which are attached in the bundle or on your laptops, pages 5 to 8 of the bundle, are there any amendments need to be made, or do any councillors need to raise any issues? Can we take them as an accurate record? Thank you. The report on the fees and charges for venue licensing 25 to 26 is on pages 9 to 14 of your bundle. Matt, as officer, could I ask you to do a summary of this for the committee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the annual report that comes to this committee in relation to scrap metal licensing, gambling and sexual entertainment venue licensing fees. The recommendation for the report is going to be that the committee agree the fees and they can go into the council sets of fees and charges for the next year. There's a little bit of background at section 1 in relation to how it came about. On 22nd of February 17, full council delegated this function down to this committee. In terms of gambling licensing, most fees are actually statutory and there aren't any ones that we can change. There are a few that have a range that we're allowed to go from sort of the minimum to the maximum. But generally speaking, most of them are statutory. Sexual entertainment venues and scrap metal dealer fees are completely locally set. So it's been adopted by the council that we would set our own fees, and it's this committee that would set them. So the bit of interest, I suspect, section 3 is the proposal, and there's a table at 3.1 which details the current fees of 24-25 and then the proposed fees for 2025-26 and percentage difference where there is. In terms of sex establishments, there are 4 separate types of fees. We don't have any currently. We've not had one in 9-10 years. Those are the fees that we would or we were able to charge under the relevant act, and we're proposing a 4% increase on those. Scrap metal dealer licenses, site licenses and collectors licenses. Again, that's a bit of a more recent piece of legislation, but that's completely locally set as well. And then again, we're proposing 4% increase on those. In terms of the Gambling Act, as I said, most are set by statute, so we can't change those. You'll see that there's one that says new in there, and it's not something that's new that we can now charge under gambling. It's something that's always been there that we've identified we didn't have a fee set for. So that is in the very rare circumstance that we have that fee, we would now be able to charge for it. That said, I don't think I've ever seen a change of circumstance fee or requirement for it. And then finally, just at the bottom of the table is casinos. Due to the legislation, if we wanted casinos, we could only have what's designated as a small casino. But equally, the council in 2007 made a resolution that we wouldn't have a casino. So the fees are, in some respects, a bit arbitrary, but they're the fees that we've had originally, and we're proposing 4% increase on those should we receive an application. Section 4, it just details the reasons and what we're able to recover under the fees, which is from the Local Government Association fee setting guidance. And then there's some sort of legal information as to how fees can be set and what's appropriate to be recovered. So I'm asking members today to agree with the recommendation of agreeing the fees for those three regimes. Thank you.
Do any councillors have any questions or comments that they'd like to make? Councillor Brown, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just briefly explain how you've come up with the 4% increase, Matt?
Yes, thank you. The 4% is in relation to sort of general council fee setting. It covers sort of the officer on costs, an increase in costs from the sort of national annual increase in wages. So it's usually standard across the board that we would look at around that figure unless there are circumstances which would suggest it's appropriate or not.
Presumably, Matt, it's comparable with other authorities that have similar establishments.
We don't really benchmark in terms of the sex establishments. Let's say we've not had one for 10 years. Some of the other local authorities around us do have them, but I'm not aware of what their fees are. In terms of scrap metal dealer licenses, we did benchmark originally when we set them. We've then moved on to a more sort of time accounting way of setting fees, so it's more appropriate to the time it takes us to complete those tasks. And the majority of the gambling ones, as I say, are statutory, so we have no power to amend those anyway.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors or comments? So the recommendation is that the committee agree the fees to be charged for the licensing of scrap metal dealers, gambling and sexual entertainment venues. Is everyone in favour? Thank you. If we go to the next item on the agenda, it's a report on the Gambling Act 2005 with a review of the statement of licensing principles. And this is a hefty lot, pages 15 to 58. So a summary, please, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, I won't go line by line. Committee will remember on the 30th of July, a report came before you in relation to a consultation for the gambling policy. We are statutorily obliged to review the policy every 3 years and within a very specific time frame, which we are adhering to. We did put the policy out to consultation and we received 3 responses, which is 2 or 3 more than normal. The responses that you'll see are detailed at 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 of the report. The first one's from GamCare Charity, who essentially just welcomed the council's position in relation to the setting of the policy. They suggest we could look at taking a public health approach to gambling and that we should pursue what's called a local area profile, which is something that we do actively do anyway. Section 1.5 is a response from the Lotteries Council, just basically accepting that they'd received a copy of it. And the one that's actually provided some consultation to what we've asked for is the Betting and Gaming Council. This is at 1.6. There were 4 main proposals within there, generally around sort of clarification purposes. So there was one at paragraph at 2.2 within the policy to try and avoid some confusion between the Licensing Act and Gambling Act regimes, which officers have accepted and changed some wording. I'll just skip the second one for a second. Paragraph 1612 to 1614 add an additional statement again in relation to mandatory and default conditions. Again, that's accepted by officers as a sensible point, so we've added some wording around that. And at paragraph 1613, there's a suggestion it should be redrafted and a sentence removed. Again, this is around potential confusion between Licensing Act applications and Gambling Act applications. Again, that was agreed, so we've amended that. There was one suggestion which we haven't agreed with, and this was at paragraph 4.8. They suggested we should remove a sentence in relation to some considerations that they didn't feel were suitable for operators when making risk assessments, and that was tended to be around sort of street drinkers and sort of vulnerable people in the locality. We've not accepted that. We do believe it's reasonable for people who want to operate and do operate in the areas to have that sort of knowledge and to have risk assessments that relate to any potential concerns that arise out of that. So we've not amended that part of the policy. Other than that, Chair, there is a lot of paper attached. Most of that is the policy itself, which is track change, so you can see what has been amended. So in terms of what we're asking today, it's that members of the committee agree the policy as attached at Appendix D of the paperwork. It can then be moved to full council on the 20th of November, and then it can be published and implemented within the timescales set by the Gambling Act. Thank you. Thank
you, Matt. Can I just thank you profusely for managing to make sense out of what must have been like wading through treacle. There's a lot of stuff in there, and you've made it very accessible to us all, as succinct as you possibly could. So thank you for that. Are there any questions from councillors or comments? Oh, sorry, John. Okay. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point on GamCare's report, where they welcome Newcastle, the Borough Council's approach to gambling. But just as a thought, could we take it a step further and ask the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee to make contact with GamCare to make sure that we've got the right approach and the effect that gambling has on our residents? Because we all know it's a terrible scourge. I've seen it over the years. Breaks families up, and other people have committed suicide, and a lot of other self-harm. So I think, would it be appropriate for this committee to ask the Health and Scrutiny just to take a look at it and look at the note from GamCare to make sure that we are on the right path, which they say they are, but they want us to go a little bit farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Matt, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Welcome Councillor Williams' comments. Just in relation to the local area profile, if I just explain a bit more about what that is, that might help the matter. A local area profile is something for the local authority to put together. It's to identify sites where we have gambling. It also identifies sites where there may be risks or concerns because there are vulnerable people or sites that may not be suited to be close to gambling, things like schools, certain religious activities and premises as well. So that will feed into the comments that Councillor Williams made, sort of feed into that local area profile as well. So it's an authority position really on what we know about the area, what gambling is going on, and who those vulnerable people would be.
I think that's very valid. Does that answer the point that you raised, Councillor Williams? Yeah. Thank you.
After you would be taken to as the officer stated, to look in more depth.
Is that?
Yes, Councillor. So in terms of the local area profile, which isn't sort of finalised, that will be something that we do put together, and that will come to the committee for you to be able to view and see what that is and what work has been done in relation to that. So if at that point there's some people that need consultation that we've not identified or areas that there might be concern, at that point we can send that out to them, and it can go out to the charities and it can go out to the same sort of responsible bodies that relate to gambling, and then we can feed that back into the committee.
Could I just ask Matt, if that's the case, since it's the report is going to be placed before full council on the 20th of November, where will that fit in with the scheme of things?
So the local area profile is intended to be a separate live document, which sits outside of the policy. The policy is really the statement of how we're going to conduct our business around gambling and the Gambling Act. The local area profile is something that we would put together for operators in the trade to be aware of, It would assist them when they're making their risk assessments, which they're obliged to do under their operating conditions. So it wouldn't be done in time to go to either in time for full council for this to go through, but it's not intended to sit within this policy. It's meant to be on its own, so we can update and look at it as and when we need to.
So that profile will cascade down over anything that might be affected.
It would be used as a tool for any party that requires it to look at the local area, and then it would help them identify potential sort of risks and concerns that they might need to be aware of.
Thank you. I think that allays both Councillor Williams and my concerns.
After full council, that's the point. It's on the health of people in the borough. What betting has on the health of the borough, of the residents in this borough.
So you're saying to send it to
Health and wellbeing scrutiny, we can do from this, and it will still go through full council. But again, the Health and Scrutiny Committee can just look at it in a bit more depth, make sure they're on the right track on behalf of the residents of this borough.
Would you like to make a comment on that, Matthew?
I'm not 100% familiar with exactly what the Health and Scrutiny Committee would be looking at in regards to this. This is a statutory process that we have to go through with a timescale that we have to meet. There's no harm reporting the policy into a separate committee who would then be able to advise of any concerns or issues, but equally we could or we would submit the local area profile into that committee if required. That seems like a more suitable route really to raise the concerns of the local gambling into that sort of forum than the policy itself, because the policy is not identical.
I think that's the best way forward. Yes. Thank you. So we're looking at the recommendations. Sorry, is there any more questions or comments? No. So we're looking at the committee considered response received to the consultation exercise and that the updated policy be presented to full council on the 20th of November. Is everyone in favour of that? Thank you. So we now move on. Minutes of the licensing subcommittee meetings. That's pages 59 to 62 of your bundle. Is everyone happy that that is a true and accurate record? Thank you. So that closes out the licensing committee items. Moving on to public protection issues now. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to public protection matters? No? Thank you. Agenda item 8 is the public space protection order car cruising consultation results, and that's pages 63 to 90 of your pack or on your pages on your laptops. And Jason, could I ask you to do a summary of this for us, please? Jason was going to be Michelle, but he's decided to be Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that, microphone wasn't working. Yes, so public space protection order for the car cruising consultation results. Recommendations that licensing the Public Protection Committee received the report and note the results from the consultation, approved implementation of the car cruising public space protection order. The reasons for that being to enable the reasonable and proportionate enforcement action to be taken in relation to an identified issue with car cruising in the borough. Just a brief background over it. In June 2024, the Licensing Public Protection Committee were presented with a report in relation to historical and current issues across the borough in regards to car cruising. The draft Public Safety Protection Order was presented to the committee, Appendix 1 for their consideration. The report was also highlighted alternative measures that had also been used to deter and prevent this behaviour from occurring and sought approval for to conduct a 12-week public consultation of the proposed PSPO. This is the first application for the Public Space Protection Order in relation to car cruising. The application is a result of persistent issues of car cruising behaviour across the borough, despite alternative enforcement techniques that have been utilised previously. And the order replicates a similar PSPO implemented in Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council, which looks to address the car cruising behaviour. And Stockport, I think, have had that in place for the last 6 years. The consultation results. The consultation ran from the 16th of July until the 2nd of October 2024. A total of 98 responses were received from local residents from the SD postcodes as part of the consultation. Full copy of the report can be found in Appendix 2. The following table on this initial report shows that 66% of local residents in the SD5 and SD7 postcodes were in favour of the PSPO, and 57% of residents from all SD postcodes were in favour. So there's clearly a majority of local respondents in favour of the PSPO. The table below just shows the breakdown of the responses of the consultation. Obviously, there was a number of respondents from outside the sub-region who responded to the consultation, but they were not local to this area. It's considered that it's less weighing and should be given to these responses. A significant number of these referred to motorcycling or being a motorcyclist. And again, I'll come over to some concerns that have been raised about that later on in this report. After the responses to the consultation results and comments, it's clear that, going from the results and the consultation that's taken place, that there is a clear majority of local residents in favour of this PSPO. It's not something that just affects one area of the borough. It has hit pretty much most wards that within the borough. There is concern from national motorcycling organisations and individuals in relation to how the proposed PSPO would impact the motorcycling community, and particular interest in the impact that this would have on charity ride-outs and events. Again, I will cover that a bit further on. Public Space Protection Order is made under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2024, whereby this legislation allows for an order to identify a particular space or area to which it is to be applied, and can make requirements or prohibitions or both within that space or area. This means that local authority can, by virtue of the order, require people to do or not to do specific things in that space or area. The local authority has powers to grant the prohibitions and requirements where it believes that they're reasonable in order to reduce or prevent an unwanted issue. The order can be applied to a specific person or everyone in this area, and it can be applied at all times and within specific times. The purpose of the car cruising PSPO is to target those who are acting in an antisocial manner, as prescribed in the order, which I think people have had the copy of. And again, this is where it relates back to the concerns people have for the motorcycling clubs and the charity events. These orders are very specific for antisocial behaviour. So the charity run, so the local egg run, I think it's called a Easter, the charity Christmas run, nothing like that would ever be looked at. The police are only ever going to use this to target the individuals that are causing the issues that we know about. The order, as I've just touched on, will be enforced by Staffordshire Police, who will respond to the incidents and calls in relation to car cruising and utilise the power as and when they deem necessary. The recommendation is that the committee receive the report and note of the results of the consultation, and that the committee approve the implementation of the car cruising PSPO. Again, like we said before, it's just to enable reasonable and proportionate enforcement actions to be taken against those that are causing antisocial behaviour in the borough. Options that could be considered is do nothing. This option obviously would not address the car cruising behaviour. This may also increase its problems due to other neighbouring authorities taking effective enforcement action. Stafford Borough have taken a PSPO on stretches of their borough. Stoke are looking at taking action against some of theirs. And I think Staff's East are looking at doing there. So a lot of local authorities around us are already ahead of the game trying to battle this problem, which is only going to push more and more into us. Another option would be to remove the reference for motorbikes in the order. whilst it's noted that obviously the majority of the car cruising incidents do relate to cars, we are aware from the police reports motorbikes are there, and I have to add it's motorbikes, it's not scooters, it's not mopeds, it's nothing like that. It is actual motorbikes. The last incident that PC Skidmore went out to, there was 3 motorbikes that were there that were part of this car cruising issue. So like I say, we could have the motorbikes removed. All that would mean is that we could enforce the PSPO for cars. Any motorbikes that are there just wouldn't come under that order. Legal and statutory implications. PSPOs can be challenged on the grounds that local authority under the legislation did not have the power either to make or vary the order, include particular prohibitions or requirements. Obviously, everything's been looked into. Financial and resource implications, there's none for us. The police would be the ones that would be enforcing this. There's no extra money to for signage or anything like that. And the other risks to take into account is, like I've just said, is other local authorities are already proactively looking to take out orders themselves. Thank you, Chair. Open to questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. Just before I go to questions, could I just say that from my part, the amount of consultation that's gone on this seems to make it very thorough. And I think it covers all bases. And I've been inundated with comments and questions, people saying, oh God, this has got to stop, how awful, and so on. So personally, I welcome this and the inclusion of motorbikes for certainly the older generation that live in our borough is essential, because they can be quite scary. And I don't think it impacts on the legitimate people who do the egg run and things like that. That's my own little preface to the questions and comments. So, councillors, any questions? Councillor Heeson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think you stole a bit of my thunder there, because some of the things I was going to say you touched on, but it just reinforces it really. I welcome this report, and I think it shows that as a council we do take our residents' views and concerns seriously. And yeah, looking at the concerns of the motorcyclists, because we did have representation from them. If you look at the documents, again, what Jason said, if you look at paragraph 3.5, paragraph 3, it does actually say there that, you know, it's only for antisocial behaviour or illegal activities that it'll be used for. So anybody going about legitimate things, you know, or legitimate runs, it's literally not for that at all. And I think certainly for our residents, they've taken the time to give us their updates, and it's only right that we do something about it. So yeah, I welcome it, and I hope it gets voted in.
Thank you, Councillor Heeson. We're on the same page. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a person who in his younger days used to ride motorcycles quite a lot, 3.5, I'm just going to read this out for people who might not have it if they're watching on the cameras. The Newcastle-under-Lyme local policing team and Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council advise that the purpose of this local authority order is to target those that use their vehicle in an antisocial manner. Officers are looking to challenge those that persistently have a negative impact on our communities, not those that are using vehicles for charity and legitimate purposes. Those that are taking part in charity ride-outs or similar would not fall under the remit of the order. Like with any legislation, officers can use their discretion around enforcement. Giving advice and information will be an option for officers before considering the issue of any fines. And then the other really interesting part is the prohibited activities referred to in clause 1 are causing a danger to other road users, driving in convoy while car cruising, performing stunts while car cruising, repeatedly sounding horns, playing music excessively, using foul or abusive language, using threatening, intimidating behaviour towards another person, or causing obstruction on a public highway or a publicly accessible place, whether moving or stationary. I think that really puts it into what this is about. You go on the egg run or the toy run or whatever, or you go to, I don't know, pub somewhere for a Sunday lunch. It's nothing to do with you. You're just going from A to B with your mates, having a drink, come back or whatever. This is very specific on what it's also discretionary for the police. So I absolutely support this. There's a Lyme Valley, for example, has a no alcohol in Lyme Valley. So you go down the Lyme Valley with your wife, have a picnic and have a bottle of wine. Police aren't interested. They're only interested if you cause a nuisance. And this is about people causing a nuisance. If they ain't causing a nuisance, police aren't interested in it. If you want to go out for a ride on a Sunday afternoon, good luck to you. Have a good time. I used to do it when I was a kid. Thank you very much. I absolutely support this.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
I actually don't think anybody at all in this room would be putting any objections into it at all, to be quite honest. It's a positive piece of work. But sometimes where we do go wrong, when we put surveys out, we don't put what we should be putting in a survey and making it really, really simple. If you've got to read all through this documentation to actually find out what we're trying to do, people are going to give up on it, aren't they? And just read what they want to read into it. And I think we could be making things a lot simpler for people out there, to be honest.
Any other councillor? Councillor Williams, Mark 2.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Put me in my place. Yeah, I do welcome this. As you know, the A34 runs through Crossheath, our ward, and people racing up and down really causes really problems, and it's quite frightening. There's public crossing ways across the A34. People going to the shops, going into the different, going to visit people. Really are concerned with the speed as these as people, and they are. It's against the law to race on the main road, without a doubt. But they go beyond racing. Like saying comedy, so fast, so behind one another that people don't have a chance, especially of my age, have a chance really to really think what I should do. You know, you panic. So really, this piece of work is, I accept it, and it's really good in the sense where talking about the main roads now. On the point of a public place, now will the police be able to go on council land and prosecute? It's a question.
Yes, they can. Yeah.
So police will be able to go, gives them authority to go onto public land,
Yeah.
and prosecute, where in some cases
They've always been able to go onto the council land anyway. This PSBO just gives them another tool to then take action against them.
but in some cases when they've been in touch with the police, it's not our, you should go on public land. We get this odd times, and I don't know, other councils have had this from the police. So this is really the concern. They go onto public land and they can stop them, plus what they do on the highway, public highway as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, and I welcome this. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify with the officer, my residents would really like me to remember that we get a lot of reports of motor vehicles, not necessarily high enough CCs to be classed as motorbikes, but mopeds on waste ground, or as Councillor Williams has said, council land. And it is a noise nuisance, and it's very wearing, and it's antisocial. So is there a minimum CC of motorbike that would be covered by this, or would mopeds and other such vehicles be covered?
Thank you. No, there's no minimum. As long as it can be classed as a motorbike or a moped, whatever it is, that is something they can take action against. It's not necessarily the vehicle that they're using. One of the advantages with the public space protection order is it's causing harassment, alarm and distress. They're there to tackle that antisocial behaviour. So depending on, it doesn't matter what that vehicle is, if it's a vehicle in itself, that can be taken action against.
It's really good news, thank you.
If I could just make a final comment. As a girl that used to sit side saddle on the back of a 500cc motorbike in her youth, I see this as protective of legitimate motorbike riders carrying out their sport for interest and not being a public nuisance. That's the difference. So it's very protective of the legitimate people. And I think that has to be remembered as well. Also, there are authorities that are closely aligned to us and border us who are making similar sort of restrictions. And if we didn't have something that aligned with it, we would find that they'd all vacated those authoritative bodies that were close to us, and they were all decamping to Newcastle-under-Lyme because nobody bothers. So I think it's essential that we have something, and I think this is drafted. And Councillor Brown raised the issue of the limitation on the motorbike, cycle, or whatever, and I think the fact that it covers that is very important. So if we just ask finally, do we receive the report and note the results of the consultation, and do we approve the implementation of the car cruising public space protection order, which we understand is cars and motorbikes? All those in favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So if we go to the next item on the agenda, item 9, which is private hire and hackney carriage fees and charges. Matt, could you do a summary for us on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, this is a report that comes to the committee annually, and it is in relation to setting of the private hire and hackney carriage fees and charges for 2025-26. Slightly different in relation to the one we've just had, in that if we seek to increase vehicle or operator fees, we have to consult and put a notice in the newspaper. So this is a request for the committee this evening to consider the proposals and allow the proposed fees to be sent out to consultation, with the results of the consultation then being fed back into the next appropriate committee. In terms of sort of background and issues, the report highlights again how it comes to be. It is the Public Protection Committee who have been delegated authority to set the fees. However, there is a statutory obligation that we consult in the certain circumstances. Those circumstances are outlined at section 2 of the report. And also importantly, at 2.4 and 2.5, there is relevant legislation that covers the setting of local authority set fees that we've got to abide by, and the sort of things that we are allowed to recover. So again, the bit presumably of most interest is section 3, the proposal of the fees themselves. Within the table, we have the column for what the fee is for, what the current fee is for 24-25, column C, which is what we are proposing for 25-26. And then column D is the percentage difference between what we currently charge and what we're proposing. You'll see that the vast majority of fees are either staying at the same fee or have a very minor increase. The ones where there is above sort of a 4% increase is where there's a very small number change, so changing from a £15 to a £16, which percentage-wise is quite big, but in sort of actual terms, real terms, it's not all that much. The main fees that people tend to look at and consult upon are the application fees themselves. So the first line is a private hire operator application fee. That is a license that lasts for 5 years, and as you can see, we're proposing to put that up by £1. The first line under the driver's section is the dual driver license, which is given for a period of 3 years. We're proposing £250 to 261, which is just over 4%. That's primarily, as we sort of discussed earlier on, in terms of staffing costs in relation to that and the time taken to undertake that activity. And then the top 2 under the vehicle section, which is on the bottom of page 93 and the top of page 94. We're looking at increasing those, one of them at 3.76% and the other at 5.2% respectively. Again, so nothing particularly large. There's one set of fees, there's 2 fees, but they're all together, where there is a large difference, and that's a minus 35%. That's for the taxi driver's knowledge test. So that's for any new drivers wanting to become a driver. They undertake the knowledge test at the council, and then there's a subsequent fee for if they book and fail to attend. It is explained in the report, but the reason for that is previously when we set the fees, when we first introduced that knowledge test, it incorporated the officer time for developing, creating, building the test itself. We've recovered that now, so we can no longer rightfully charge for that work. There are a number of new fees that we are looking to introduce, which again are outlined within the report at 3.7. Just briefly, the first one relates to having a director or a license holder of a private hire operator license changes their home address. We don't currently have a fee for that, so there is the potential for a director of a company to move their home address, which gets listed onto a license, which is a different address to their base. Currently, if that happens, we process that application, that notification without charge. This is to recoup some costs for that. It's not something that happens a lot, but again, it's something that could happen, and we should cost recover that fee. There's the exemption request, which is on all three, but it's the same thing really. We occasionally have requests from license holders who hold licenses to be exempt from certain policy requirements, and that could be to do with signage on vehicles. It could be to do with having to undertake certain tests or training requirements. And at the moment, we don't have any fee to recover that piece of work, so it's just done as part of the policy without recovering our costs. Other local authorities do have a fee, and it seems sensible to add that in for if we do have it, if we do have those sorts of requests. There's an application support appointment. So as it says in the report, during the pandemic, we moved entirely online to digital processes. It is apparent that through those years and even now, there are some applicants who aren't able to converse that well with some of our digital requirements. So we are looking at setting a fee should we choose to use it in terms of potentially rolling out a clinic or a face-to-face type appointment system if required. Not wholesale, we wouldn't want to see everyone again because most people deal perfectly well with the technology and the digital side of things, but there are instances again where we go and we help and we photocopy and we spend time with people, and again where people need that level of assistance, it's feasible that we might want to recover that time. There's a private hire vehicle change of base, and this is already a requirement that the council have to be notified when a driver either stops working for one company and moves to another, or carries on with one and starts to work for a second or a third company. However, what we're looking at doing is when we issue the licenses, stating which companies that vehicle is attributed to, is working to. It's something that works very well at Stoke City Council, and a lot of the larger operators who do that really like that. They like to know who their drivers are working for as well as them, and it helps us from a compliance point of view, knowing who drives for who and at what point. So it's actually something the trade have asked us to implement, something similar to Stoke-on-Trent. And the final one is a Hackney Carriage tariff sheet. So the local metered fares, which the committee agreed to earlier in the year, we have a document which we give to Hackney Carriage vehicles. That's meant to be on display or available to members of the public when they're in the vehicle. We would give them the first time as part of the licence procedure, but should they lose and need another one, we would charge them for it. So I don't think any of those are particularly unreasonable, but they are ones we've not charged for previously. So again, just for the committee to consider those proposed fees, then for us to go out to consultation and then come back to you with the results of that consultation. Thank you.
For my part, where there's any changes that need to be made, for example, you mentioned addresses, that's traceability, and that's sometimes really important. And everyone, whether they're changing the holiday destination, they're changing the holiday transport or whatever, there's usually an administration fee attached to it. And I think we would be less than normal or average if we didn't we need to charge for that sort of change. I think that's just my comment. Do any councillors have any questions or comments they'd like to make? Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, so it's not a question, no, Madam Chair. It's a comment really. What Matt hasn't said, I think, which perhaps needs saying, is we don't make any money on this. This is just simply cost recovery. The whole thing is, that's why the figures are so weird at times. It's all cost recovery. It's like the knowledge test, because it's been done. We put the money back in. There's no money made. We just simply pay for the service that we do, the excellent service, to be honest with you, I think, that we do. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the recommendation that we consider the proposed fees, which we have, the proposed fees be sent out for consultation, and the following consultation a further report is brought to the committee. Everyone in favour? Yes. Thank you. So if we move on to agenda item 10 is the taxi and private hire licensing policy 2025 to 2030. And this is pages 99 to 198. So another tome for Matt to do his summary report on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll summarise as best I can. The committee will remember that we introduced a new taxi licensing policy in 2019, which was a wholesale change to what we had previously. There's been a few changes since that time, 6 in total, some to incorporate statutory standards into the policy, some for minor sort of application criteria changes, which are all detailed within the report. But in 2021, what we did was we set the time period for policy for 5 years. And with it being 2025 very soon, we've come to the time where we need to review that policy in line with documentation that's already out there, in line with other local authorities, which I'll go through now. So before I get into the heavy bit of explaining what we've done, the recommendation is that we review the policy document in terms of what's being proposed, and then it's sent out for consultation, a 12-week consultation with the trade and all relative bodies. So what we're asking really is for permission to send out what we have already drafted, and I anticipate that we will get a number of responses from trade and responsible authorities and bodies, interested parties in relation to this. We typically do. So, as I said, since the implementation, it's been amended 6 times, most notably when the Department for Transport statutory guidance came out in 2020. We amended it in 2021 to incorporate that. And then most recently, where we amended the vehicle application requirements and allowed tinted windows in certain circumstances. Current policy end date is 2025. There's no set time in there, and it's not a statutory policy. It's one that we've created of our own accord, although the DFT do suggest that every council should have a cohesive policy. So as such, it's due for review. Since our last review, the Department for Transport have also issued non-statutory guidance, their best practice guidance, and this is the first time it's been updated since 2010. So it is markedly different from then, given all of the changes that have gone on within the taxi licensing sphere. Council's primary overriding priority for taxi licensing is to protect the public, so everything that's within the policy is aimed at doing that. Excuse me. So having regard to the best practice guidance from 2023 and following discussions with neighbouring local authorities, we've drafted an amended document which is attached to Appendix A. Again, it's track change, so you can see all of the changes. And if it helps with Appendix B, there's a Word, well, it's PDF in here, but a list of all the changes that we've made, most of which are minor typos, changing web links, those sorts of things, but it also details the main changes as well, which I'm going to cover just now. There were 6 proposals which we're suggesting are probably a bit more, that require a bit more input, and they're the ones which we're anticipating the trade will probably consult on most likely. The first one, which is probably the biggest, is in terms of our vehicle criteria. Currently, you'll be aware that we have a policy that says any vehicles must be less than 7 years old when they're first licensed, and after a period of time when they're 10 years old, they have more frequent testing. What we're looking to do is move away from an age policy altogether, which is suggested within the best practice guidance, and move towards an emissions and fuel type criteria, and provide a timescale for when the council would cease to license certain types of vehicles with certain types of fuel and engine types. And I'll go over exactly what that is in a moment. The second one is to reinstate grandfather rights for Hackney carriage vehicles when transferred between proprietors. I'll explain what that is in a second. The third one, which is probably the second biggest one, is removal of vehicle door livery. Fourth is to remove the suitability guidelines appendix from the policy and treat it as a separate document. That is also under consultation at the moment, and due to change, an officer's view is that it would be sensible to have that as a separate document that we can refer to and relate to outside of policy while still dealing with matters required. The fifth one isn't really a big change, but in 2019 we put that when we give licenses to people in terms of their conditions, we would ask them to sign them so that they understood. The pandemic sort of put a halt to that. We've never asked anyone to actually sign the conditions. Them making the application and then accepting the documents that we provide to them is acceptance enough. There's no statutory guidance or statutory requirement that they have to sign them. So we're looking to remove that as something which will assist the team. And then the final one is to a slight amendment to that knowledge test that we mentioned in the fees and charges report, to move away from a 65% in each section, because there's multiple sections and requiring 75% overall. So if I just go through a bit more detail on what those mean. In terms of the vehicle criteria, the 2.5 of the report, which is on page 101, it has a paragraph from the Department of Transport Best Practice Guidance, which states that licensing authorities should not impose age limits for the licensing of vehicles, and instead they should consider more targeted requirements to meet their policy objectives on emissions, safety ratings, and increasing wheelchair accessible provision where this is low. What we're proposing is that from the 1st of April 2025, and of course this is all subject to going through consultation and revised timescales, but what we're proposing is from that date on, the vehicle will stop licensing any vehicles which are Euro 4 emission standard and powered solely by petrol, diesel or LPG. And for reference, Euro 4 vehicles are vehicles that were registered and manufactured between January 2006 and January 2011. We have 3 of those on the fleet. The second is that from April 2025 until March 2026, the council will accept renewal applications for the last time in connection with vehicles which are of the Euro 5 emission standard, powered solely by petrol, diesel or LPG internal combustion engines. And Euro 5 are vehicles registered, manufactured between January 2011 and September 2015. We have just over 150 of those, roughly a third of our fleet. From the 1st of April 2027, the council will then stop licensing the new licensing, so first-time licensed vehicles which are solely powered by petrol, diesel or LPG internal combustion engines. So that is inclusive of Euro 6 vehicles, which is the current and most up-to-date standard that there is. And for reference, that is all vehicles with internal combustion engines registered since the 1st of September 2015. This would not affect the renewal of any of those Euro 6 vehicles that are already on the fleet and retained on the fleet, so any licence prior to that date would continue. And then importantly, those first 3 criteria, none of them would stop any licensing of hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles or other zero emission vehicles. Then from the 31st of March 2030, the council would stop licensing of vehicles which are powered solely by petrol, diesel, LPG internal combustion engines. Again, that would not affect electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, or other zero-emission vehicles like hydrogen fuel. But by that date, we would not be licensing any more Euro 6 or any other internal combustion engine vehicles as taxis or private hire vehicles. And then from the 31st of March 2035, the council would stop licensing of hybrid vehicles so that all vehicles had to then be zero tailpipe emission. At section 6 there, it's all vehicles over the age of 10 years would be subject to the council's safety inspection after 6 months. That's what we currently do. But that would obviously, the fleet would be different, but we'd still be looking to inspect older vehicles more regularly to ensure they remain safe to remain on the fleet. And there's also then a recommendation that when people are looking at buying replacement vehicles, that they review the Euro NCAP safety ratings in terms of those vehicles. So there's no stipulation on what they must buy or what they must look at. That could be something that happens in the future, but that would be something we would recommend anyway. But this, in this respect, it would then be within the policy. Importantly, this is the same proposal that Stoke-on-Trent are putting forward. So we have met with our colleagues, come up with this timeline, and this timeline has also gone out to consultation with Stoke-on-Trent as of last Monday. So they have started their consultation process. They have a slightly different committee and process to us, but it's the same proposal. And the basis of it is Staffordshire County Council taxi decarbonisation. It should say in the report, not carbonisation. That's the wrong way. We're looking at towards best practice across the county. Every authority is looking at doing something slightly different, but we're all working towards the same goal. The second point was around hackney carriage vehicles and transferring them in grandfather rights. In 2019, we had a number of vehicles that regularly fell below standards, and we found that they were being transferred to unsuspecting new drivers by people that knew the vehicles probably weren't going to pass the test again. So it ended up going to this new person. We would test it, we would fail it and take it off the fleet. To combat that, we stopped the ability of transferring the grandfather rights. So that's replacing a saloon vehicle with another saloon vehicle with another saloon vehicle. Since then, we've had a number of requests from the trade to reintroduce the grandfather rights. We do believe there are other ways that we can deal with if that situation did occur again, we can take action against the person who has had the vehicle, obviously not maintained the vehicle, and then sold it on. And we believe that's probably a more appropriate way of dealing with it from now on. Section 2.7, and this is in relation to door livery. And this is probably the second biggest section that we're probably going to be talking about and we're proposing. The best practice guidance again. DFT's position is that licensing authorities should seek to differentiate the profile of private hire vehicles from hackney carriages, which is something we already do, as these can only be legally engaged through a booking with a licensed operator. And local authorities should not impose a livery requirement on private hire vehicles. The more distinctive a private hire vehicle is made to appear, the greater the chance that it might be confused with a taxi, hackney carriage. They change their terminology, but when they say taxi, typically they mean hackney carriage. Licensing authorities' private hire vehicle signage requirements should be limited to the authority licence plate or disc. So they are the front and back squares and rectangle plates that you see on all of our vehicles, and a pre-booked only door sign. This approach enables passengers to give the clear and consistent message: you should only get into a vehicle that's got a taxi roof sign on unless it's been pre-booked and you received information from the operator as to which vehicle you are expecting. Our current policy states that both our hackney carriages and our private hire vehicles should display additional door signage that denotes the type of vehicle it is. So on the hackney carriages, there's a rectangular white sign on each back rear passenger door, and it's a green sign on the private hire vehicles. We also provide that our private hire vehicles currently must have their operator door signage on their front driver and passenger doors to indicate which operator they work for, or operators if more than one. Again, having spoke with our colleagues at Stoke-on-Trent City Council, they intend to remove the requirement from having door delivery on private hire vehicles. And Wolverhampton, as you know, we have a lot of vehicles in the area, as they are nationally, have removed all door delivery requirements from their vehicles, and in fact prohibited them from putting door delivery on their vehicles to assist with the differentiation between hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. So taking into account our conversations with Stoke and looking at probably the next largest provider of vehicles or licensing authority set of vehicles in the area, we are proposing to remove all livery from our vehicles except for the front and back plate on private hire vehicles. I've already mentioned the suitability guidelines being sort of a separate live document, and the removal of being required to sign conditions. And again, the tax and knowledge test, I think I've already explained. So it's probably the door livery and the vehicle age criteria, which are the two main matters that we're proposing on, which we anticipate we will have some comments on from the trade. So recommendation today, Chair, is for members of the committee to review the proposed policy document, which is attached at Appendix A, and to approve that the policy document is sent out for 12-week consultation with the trade and relevant stakeholders, and we would then come back to committee for a final decision as to what our new policy or updated policy would include. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. You must be exhausted. Councillors, do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make? Councillor Brown.
Just to say thank you for this enormous and thorough piece of work, and I particularly am impressed with your work with other authorities, because that kind of joined up approach is really to be commended across the council. So thank you.
Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, Matt, this the door livery, do the people who've drawn this up think we all got sort of black cabs as in London? Is that the problem? It's so London-centric they don't realise the rest of the world exists.
I wouldn't be as bold to say that. The Department for Transport, it is a system that is used in London. You'll all be aware of the famous black cabs of London, what they look like. Everyone knows what a taxi is in London. Private hire vehicles go very much under the radar in London, because they don't even have plates on the front and the back. They have what's effectively like the old tax disc size thing in their rear windscreen, and I think within their front windscreen as well. But it's literally that size. The private hire trade there is typically sort of your app-based operators, your providers. So people who are booking vehicles in that way will have that instant confirmation of, we are expecting this vehicle with this registration number, and this is the type of vehicle and what colour it is. So in those instances, those people know what they're expecting and where it's coming to, and they are very different in respect of the hackney carriages that are in that area. Of course, the UK is a little bit bigger and different than London, and we all do have our slightly different requirements and suggestions in terms of what we have in our taxi fleet. But what it appears to be in the best practice guidance, which is just best practice guidance, it's not statutory, but we do have to look at it and consider it when we're setting our policy, is this particular element is around consistency and differentiating between hackneys and private hire vehicles. And it seems to be that you make the hackney carriages as obvious as you can. They've got the roof signs on. Locally, we've got the big white stripe across the sides. They're all black with that white stripe. You know where they're going to be because they're sat on a rank or in a certain location. And if you're not going to a rank to get into a car, you should know what vehicle you're getting into before you get into it. That's the thrust of the guidance.
Any other councillors have any questions or comments they'd like to make?
I don't think I'm quite. I don't think I'm quite getting. When you say we're having 2 plates in the front and the back, so that's the only advertisement we'll have. I haven't got,
So the proposal is that, yes, our Hackney carriages will remain as they are.
yeah,
So they'll have the white stripe, the roof sign, they'll still be black.
Yeah.
And they'll undertake the activity that they normally undertake. The proposal is for the private hire vehicles where we would have the rectangular front plate still on display on the front of the vehicle on the exterior and the square one on the rear of the vehicle. Yes.
can I just ask if anybody's thought about partially sighted people? I can't actually see the plates on the front. So, you know, we're not being considerate to everybody, are we? And there's a lot of people who don't drive, I don't drive, and partially sighted, and I wouldn't have any idea at all if I booked a private taxi and that was coming towards me. I go by the name that's on the taxi.
It has been considered. There's two arguments and two sort of viewpoints in relation to this very particular point. And actually, when we submitted our original response to the best practice guidance consultation, we were of that view. We know of some companies nationally and some authority areas nationally where they are going the other way, and they believe that door livery should remain. Generally for that purpose, and we're also aware that the school contracting companies have a contractual obligation with the vehicles, with the operators, to have that signage on. They're going through that contract at the minute, particularly with Wolverhampton, but other local authorities as well, as to how they would then discharge that contractual sort of liability alongside a council authority that says either you can't or you shouldn't have a door livery on there. So it is a matter for members to consider, but also for the consultation. I do suspect it's going to be one where we receive a lot of consultation on supporting both sides. But it's the reason we've put it forward in the way that we have done is for the consideration to be more consistent across the board. But I do take your point, yes.
I think it's a valid point raised, especially for older people who are the more vulnerable.
If you go to the eye clinic now, sorry, if you go to the eye clinic, which I have to go to once a month, it's absolutely packed. In there, there's 400 people at least a day, and all them people have got to be considered. Because let's face it, you can't have a licence if you can't see, can you? So, you know. I
think one of the good things, Councillor Williams, is that this is for consideration and for consultation. So there's time to make comment and get back to the officers and the committee to actually look at it again. Councillor Williams, do we?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, Matt, thanks again for the report, and I hope it goes out to consultation. I'll just come on that in a minute. But do Wobber have to advertise their taxi, other than when you ring them up, they give you the registration and the colour of the car? Do they have to put any signs on their vehicles?
To who? Sorry.
Uber.
Right, sorry. I missed that. So Uber are just private hire vehicles. There seems to be some mystique still as to who they are and how they operate and what they do. They're a private hire operator and they have private hire vehicles. So in each local authority area that the vehicle is licensed, they have to meet the requirements of that local authority. So if currently, if it was a Newcastle licensed vehicle, private hire vehicle, they would have to have a door sign on both sides that says Uber. They would have to have a green sign on their back passenger doors that we issue that says this is a private hire vehicle, must be pre-booked. And then they would have the plates on the front and back as we dictate. If it was a vehicle from Stoke-on-Trent, it would be very similar, although the colour of their signs are different. If it was a vehicle from Wolverhampton, they wouldn't have to have any signage on, but they would have to have their plate on the rear of the vehicle because that is what their requirements currently are. So it's not the company themselves, it's just which local authorities that they're licensed by, and they have to work to, well, as many local authorities as they're licensed by.
Wolverhampton seem to have more taxis. You see a load in Newcastle, work in Newcastle, licensed in Wolverhampton. They've got a weaker policy than ourselves. You know, I'm not saying we water it down this policy or when it goes into consultation, but they seem to have a lot of taxis about. Why did they go to Wolverhampton to apply for a licence?
It's a good question.
Yeah. Why? There's that many Wolverhampton licensed taxis in the borough.
There is. The reason being is that the law changed in 2015, which allowed private hire bookings to be subcontracted from one operator in one area to an operator in a different area. And the idea was to allow more flexibility within businesses and sort of a freer market. What actually happened was local authorities, operators, got multiple operating licenses with multiple authorities and then subcontracted the work around in between all of their various companies and vehicles and drivers. Perfectly legitimate, perfectly legal. Some local authorities, in terms of their licensing policies, allowed, particularly for private hire operators, they'll have rules around where your base needs to be, what it needs to have, should it be manned, does there need to be a telephone, and so on and so on. Wolverhampton don't have that. And what that means is that operators can set up a base in Wolverhampton in an office with a computer in, which deals with their computerized records. Again, perfectly legitimate, perfectly lawful. But that made it so that local operators could license with them as well as other local authorities as well. At the same time as doing that, they changed their requirements for drivers and for vehicles, and they cut out what in their view was unnecessary requirements, and that made it easier for a lot of people, not against all local authorities, but against some local authorities to get licenses issued there than in other places. They also had low costs for renewing licenses. So it started slowly. People would go there, and it's been a long-term thing. It has been going on for years and years, and something we term license shopping. People will go to the easiest or the quickest or the cheapest authority. So people started going to Wolverhampton, and then more people started going to Wolverhampton, so more operators got licenses, so more people went to get driver's licenses with Wolverhampton, and it snowballed. So it's not the lowest standard at all. I wouldn't say that at all. But they did change their standards, and because of how they set themselves up in terms of who they would license and how they would license them, it has made it easier than certain local authorities or a lot of local authorities within the UK. And it allows companies to license with them and then have drivers and vehicles licensed with them and then subcontract their work to those drivers. So again, it's all perfectly lawful, but that's how it's come to be.
Come back, Madam Chair. Another point. Within the policy, I mean, it's looking page after page after page after page. And if you're a taxi driver, we should know every page, but especially the licence holders should know the policy. But those on the subcommittees, time and time again, taxi drivers come along and they haven't let the council know if they've had an accident or whatever within so many days, 7 days, whatever it is. Time and time again. Now, within this draft, can we highlight some of the faults that come before the subcommittees? Because, you know, time and time again, you sit there and they say, oh, well, I haven't got whatever, any excuse. But it's so important that they could lose their licence. That you know, and we all sit there, we've all had to do that. It's not a very nice thing to do. But the excuses that people come up with, and really they should know offhand what are the circumstances around them losing their licence.
As I understand it, and Matt will probably be able to give more than me, that there is a very robust database that each authority can tap into to find out exactly what the person's done or not reported. Matt, would you like to make additional comment?
Yes, Chair, thank you. They're two separate things. So if I just address your point first, there is a national database which every local authority must record all driver records where they've refused, revoked or suspended, if it's in relation to road safety or vulnerable, public safety. So that's one thing, and every local authority does input onto that and search on that. In terms of Councillor Williams' point, I must highlight it's only a small proportion of our total drivers where we do bring them before committee that have either failed to declare a conviction or that they've had an accident or whatever. Every single licence holder gets a copy of their conditions or the code of conduct when the licence is issued to them. We would really expect them, upon receipt of getting their licence, to read their paperwork, but I do appreciate the excuses and the reasons that we hear at subcommittee time and time again. Something that we are anticipating in doing, we did start, and unfortunately it sort of went away, is we started sending sort of regular or semi-regular newsletters, and as part of that we would have a sort of, don't forget to do this, just please remember that your conditions say that you've got to do this if this happens. Just as that reminder, as Councillor Williams sort of suggesting, that you get that letter, and if you read it, it will tell you that these are the upcoming changes or the proposals that we're doing, and we'll do something similar when we send the consultation out in whatever form. We'll say, please remember, if any of these things happen to you, you've got a duty to tell us, and if you don't, then there's potential consequences for you. So again, we do appreciate that people should be reading them. Sometimes they don't, but anything we do to help them along acts in their favour because they'll read them, but also in our favour, and we can say, well, you've been told.
I think that's incredibly helpful of us. But what we shouldn't be doing is acting as a PA to a taxi firm that are actually in business to make their own money.
Yes, it's not that at all. And as I say, we haven't done it for a little while now, but we had started sending out a letter, and it was around when we were putting the policy out in 2019, 2020. Don't forget, these are your new requirements. Please don't forget to do these things. By the way, we're going back to committee for this reason. And we do want to get back to that. And as we get to the digital age, as we get closer to it, we'll be able to sign people up to mailing lists and periodically send something out that says this is an interesting thing that's happened in the taxi world, and also if you've had an accident, don't forget to tell us, or things along those lines. So it is something we've done in the past. It's something we want to get back to. We're not trying to spoon feed, but there is no harm in that periodic reminder that there are certain things that need to be notified us, because there's very good reason why we need to know. Thank you.
Councillor Heeson.
I probably should know this. Is there a limitation on how long it has to take for them to notify you when they've moved house or address?
7 days.
Okay, that concludes agenda item 10. So the recommendation is that we've discussed it here, we've reviewed it. It will go for further review and approve the policy document to be sent out for 12-week consultation with the relevant stakeholders. All those in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 11 is the minutes of what looks to have been the shortest meeting on record. Is everyone happy that this is a true and accurate record of the minutes of that meeting? I'm assured it was an hour and a half. I take it all back. There is no closed agenda items and therefore no disclosure of exempt information. There's no urgent business. So at 8:20, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending.